Subscribe now for our extensive video library of leadership lessons promoting faith, family, and freedom.
Not one of those people got up that morning and went, I know what I'll do. I'll run to the airport, I'll latch onto an airplane, and I'll fly off into the wild blue yonder. Not one of them thought that. But in that moment, their passion, their desire for freedom was so rich, so deep, so heartfelt, they were willing to do anything to get it.
Master the Story Power method to captivate your audience, improve workplace culture, and 10x your fundraising.
Scan the QR code to book your first coaching call or visit storypowercoach.com.
Subscribe now for access to our extensive media library of leadership lessons promoting faith, family, and freedom. Begin your personal growth plan at storypoweracademy.com for leadership development and communication skills training.
We have a distinct treat coming up in the room. We're going to have one more speaker before we move to a little bit of a longer break. And the speaker is Mr. J. Loren Norris. And the first time I heard J. Loren Norris speak, I immediately started scribbling notes. I wasn't at this event as an attendee. I was at an event to be a support to the event, and I forgot about that as I was completely on the edge of my seat, leaning in on every single word J. Loren had to say. He started talking about how to tell stories and how to speak and how to teach and how to resonate with your most ideal client in a way that was so impactful. I was scribbling notes and flipping to the next page and scribbling more notes, and I thought to myself, we need him at our conference. And so I lined up a call to talk to him. This was, by the way, at Daniela and Patrizio's conference. They have amazing people at their event. If you haven't been to the Kingdom Book Awards and you're a Christian author, you need to be there. You're going to meet amazing people. I met multiple great people who are in this room right now, but one of them was J. Loren and his wife Karen, and they're incredible people. They're so good at what they do. And today he's going to be talking about how to empower influence through his Story Power Academy strategies. And today's message is the influence equation. J. Loren has won speaking competitions. He has done amazing things in the space. And he's going to be talking about how your story power plus purpose plus assignment equals generational change. A big round of applause for Mr. J. Loren Norris!
I walked into the garage, I opened up the toolbox, and I pulled out this, I thought it was a mixer. You know, like mom makes a cake with, and when she's done, you lick all the chocolate off of it. That's exactly what I thought it was. But when I picked it up and I started spinning it, it opened up. It was the coolest thing. You ever seen those little balls, like you pull them and you could put it on your head, but it's also small enough to put in your pocket? It was like that. It converted itself over time. And so I would spin it and it would open it up and it would close back down. I was like, that is so cool. And so I did it a couple of times, and then, you know who Gibbs is? Anybody watch NCIS? Yeah, so my uncle walks up behind me when I'm spinning it, smacks me in the back of the head, and he's like, stop doing that. I'm like, what? But it's cool, watch this. So I spun it again. It opens again. Guess what he did? He smacked me in the back of the head again. He's like, why are you doing that? I said, because it looks cool. He said, but do you even know what that is? I have no clue. He said, do you know what it's made for? I said, no. He said, do you know that every time you do that, you're damaging it? Never thought of that. Turns out what I was playing with was a cylinder hone. Anybody ever seen one of those? It looks just like a mixer. The difference is you put that on the end of a drill, and when your engine is going bad, you throw the remote on the ground and make all the batteries fall out. When you want to clean out the inside of the cylinder, this thing has to be perfectly balanced, perfectly smooth, and it goes inside the top of the cylinder, and when you spin it with the drill, thanks, sir, it smooths out the inside of the engine, which means when you spin it in your hand and those little weights move around, it's completely out of balance. That makes it a paperweight. So what was a $500 or $600 tool for a very specialized purpose now is absolutely useless. Has anybody ever used a tool for something it wasn't made for and destroyed it in the process? You should all raise your hands, because we all, like sheep, have gone astray. Every one of us to our own way. Meaning the thing God made you for is not what you've been doing with that. Am I wrong? It's a harsh word, isn't it? So, who has an origin story? Raise your hand if you have an origin story. Raise your hand if you have more than one. Let that settle in for a second, because here's really the key question to the origin story question. Do you have more than one? Why would you have more than one? What else? What about the fact that if I told I once was a sinner, but now I'm not, I once was blind, but now I'm free, and I told that to a bunch of 12-year-olds versus a bunch of 35-year-olds, would I tell the story the same? If I told that to a bunch of free people who were making a whole lot of money and their biggest issue was pride and ego, versus I told that to a bunch of prisoners whose issue was they couldn't even see daylight, would I tell the same story? Ian, how many of you have seen people step into this place, put a mic in their hand, and they tell exactly the same story? Because that's my story. And what they're not asking is, what story does he need to hear? What is she looking for? What does God want to say to that one? I was at an event on the stage teaching. I think I had a 10-minute window that particular day. And I was teaching on being weapons of spiritual warfare. And as I was teaching, I wasn't paying any attention to the fact that my phone, because I intentionally don't wear it up here. Why? Because we're all addicted, right? And if it buzzes, wait, the world's got to stop. I have to answer the phone. It could be the end of the world. So I leave it over there. I didn't know it was buzzing. I was ignoring it. I was carrying on with what I had to say. What was in that moment, I was present. What was in that moment was more important than whatever could be happening with my phone. And I remember saying to the crowd, you are weapons of mighty warfare, and our job is to equip you, the saints, for the work of the kingdom. And as I walked off the platform, my wife was trying to come through the crowd. She'd been working in the back of the room in the sales table. She's walking through the crowd coming at me, white as a sheet. And she's got her phone in her hand. She said, I have 16 missed calls from the same kid. And I picked up my phone, and I did too. Same kid. His girlfriend says, somebody ran a red light. We're on our way to the ER. That night, while I was on the platform, living my purpose, someone ran a red light in a full-size pickup truck. My son was on his motorcycle. My son hit that truck so hard, he totaled the truck. The damage to the truck was beyond repair. We drove really fast to the ER. We got there, we see the trauma nurse. The trauma nurse says, wait, who's the victim? And my son goes, oh, that was me. And they went, how fast were you going? 45. I mean, it was a 45-mile-an-hour zone going through red. 45. You hit a pickup at 45 and you walked into my ER? And so they strapped him in a chair and they did MRIs and they did x-rays and they did everything else. And do you know that same weekend before I finished that platform event, he walked in the door and he said to everybody, and Natalie can confirm it, she was there when he was injured, she was there praying with the team when we left, she was there when he came back. When you're living your purpose, you have an enemy. And he has a lot of friends. And he'll do whatever he takes to keep you from being right here. Now let me tell you something you've already heard today. And I want to reinforce it because there is no way to understate it. There is no greater place to build the kingdom than right here. Let me juxtapose that with one thing that should strike the fear of God in your heart. There is no greater place to build a fiefdom than right here. And if you find that what you're building is your own kingdom and not the kingdom of God, you're using that tool for the wrong purpose. I watched the aircraft take off out of Baghdad and out of Bagram Air Base. Anybody watching that live when they pull out from Afghanistan happened? That C-17 took off down the runway. And I'm watching these people on the outside of the aircraft, and I'm thinking, y'all don't know how that thing works, do you? Because if you're on the outside, there's no oxygen pressured cabin. And I don't care how strong you are, if you're holding on to the landing gear, at some point at 500 miles an hour and 3,000 feet in the air, your grip ain't that good. And gravity's going to kick in. And you're probably going to, even if you got up on the top of the landing gear, Tom Cruise style, when it folds up inside, it's still not going to be pleasant. And if you're one of those people that was laying on the wing, holding onto the front of the wing, I don't know about you, I've actually laid on the wing of a C-141. That is not a fun place to be. I mean, it wasn't moving. I was laying on the ground. But I'm still looking way down at the ground, not realizing the runway could be that far away while you're still on it. And I'm watching this plane taxi down the runway, and I'm thinking all those people, do you really think you're getting to the U.S. like that? And then you know what dawned on me? They were so desperate for freedom, they were willing to put their life on the line. And there were people who were willing to say, I'll do anything I can to get you home, to get you free, but I can't help you here. And all of that was a little troubling, but you know what really struck me? I was working with a client not too long ago. She's a missionary. We're working on some of her stories, fundraising to go back to Uganda. And she's telling me one of her stories, and when she was done, I said, in this metaphor, how many people do you see? She goes, oh, it's not a metaphor, it's my story. Is there any chance it's also someone else's story? Is there any chance that what you suffered through, somebody else is currently suffering in? Is there any chance that what you're saying isn't about you? It's about thousands of others who need to know what you just figured out. And it kind of stopped her in her tracks. And I told her the C-17 story. And as I was telling her that story, it struck me. Not one of those people got up that morning and went, I know what I'll do. I'll run to the airport, I'll latch onto an airplane, and I'll fly off into the wild blue yonder. Not one of them thought that. But in that moment, their passion, their desire for freedom was so rich, so deep, so heartfelt, they were willing to do anything to get it. And you know where they ended up? Every one of them that came off the bottom of that plane as it took off went to one of two places. None of them lived another day. As A.W. Tozer said it, remember that those who went to the cross had no illusion they were coming back. Take up your cross and follow me is not a I'll see you tomorrow kind of a statement. Those people who latched onto that plane thinking I'm flying off to safety were deluded. But what they flew into was eternity. Now the question we have to ask ourselves as believers is, have we prepared those who have trusted us? Not to make a decision about the marketing, that's a great idea. To make a decision about their business plan, got to do that. To make a decision about how you're going to steward your money, absolutely must. But have we prepared them for that morning they wake up and never go to sleep? See, our origin story can't just be about me and what I lived through. It's got to be about how do I transfer that hope to the next person, the next generation. Our generational impact sits on the backside of that. As Justin said, I've competed in a couple of international speech competitions. The one particularly depicted on the screen was the Great American Speakoff, which was hosted by Grant Cardone and Pete Vargas. And I think there were around 30,000 people that entered that contest. When we entered that contest in Dallas, there were 7,800 people that showed up that day in Dallas to compete. Some of the people in that competition were John Gray and Mondo Davis and Summer, if you don't know Summer Day. She was one of the competitors in that contest. I made it out of the 30-ish thousand to the final round of 100. I had a golden ticket. You can see it there in my hand. And so that was a lot of fun, and that was about 3 years ago, December of 22. I guess that's almost 4 years ago now. I'm getting way too old. That means the clock is speeding up, you know what I'm saying? In 2010, at 4:15 in the morning, I was awakened from my sleep, and the Holy Spirit said, "You prepare the message, I'll prepare the platform." And I went, "What does that mean?" I had no idea. And so I did what anybody would do. I started doing the research. What does it mean to prepare a platform? What is a platform? What does that look like? How do you do that? And of course, this is what I envisioned. And so I did what anybody would do, exactly what Rhonda did. I joined Toastmasters. And I got my competent communicator in 91 days. And they said, "You should compete." And so I joined the international speech competition with Toastmasters. And in 11 and a half months, I competed in Las Vegas for the World Championship of Public Speaking in 2011. Out of 35,000 international contestants, I made it to the semifinals of 82 people. And now I'll tell you the real heartbreak. Before we went to Vegas, we heard this new rule that you can't use in your primary speech. You can't use the same speech for the semifinals or your lower level contestants. You can't use that same speech all the way to the finals. So if you win at semifinals, you have to have a completely fresh, never been told before speech to compete in the finals with. And I had worked so hard all these months to prepare my semifinal speech, the one that was going to get me from club to area to district to. And when I sat down and said, "Okay, Holy Ghost, help me write the next one," he said, "You don't need it." Excuse me? He said, you won't need it. Thanks for the confidence. Be bold, be strong, but you don't need that. And I tried. I probably wrote 5 or 6 ridiculously useless speeches. And I got to the semifinals. And the day that we were about to get there, driving to Las Vegas, I'm on the phone with John Maxwell. I had also just joined the John Maxwell team as a certified coach. And I'm on the phone as my truck is running out of gas going through the mountains of Nevada to try to get to Las Vegas. And he's like, "Hey, we start on Monday with our the first ever international Maxwell conference." And I had a ticket, but I had to choose World Championship or Maxwell. And so I went to the World Championship and knew I could go to the Maxwell thing the next February. And as we're on that call, John says to me personally, he says, "So, why did you join the John Maxwell team, and what are you going to do with this?" And I said, for years of my life, I really just thought, I want to be the next James Dobson. I want to write books. I want to write speeches. I want to travel around the world. Natalie, will you give her a hand, please? Thank you. Thanks, Justin. Wrong hand, she needed both. So John says to me, "Don't you dare." Excuse me? He said, "Don't you dare be the next James Dobson." Why? Because we already have one of those. You need to be the best J. Loren Norris you could possibly be. And I can tell you, it's been almost 15 years now, and those words still hit me hard. It was after that phone call, I was a little emotional, I was a little mad, I was a little terrified that our diesel truck was going to run out of gas before we got to Vegas, because there's not a whole lot of diesel along the way. But I was just having my quiet time, rehearsing my speech, and still praying, "God, what is this next speech going to be?" And he kept saying, "You don't need it." And finally I said, "All right, fine, if I don't need it, tell me why I don't need it." I mean, that's a fair question, right? He said, "Well, because one of the guys you're going to compete against, this is his 6th try. 6. And he's already told me in his prayer time that if he doesn't win this time, he's given up on me." And I can't have that. And so I got there, and I got in the competition, and I walked up on the stage, and it was a very large stage, probably 70 feet wide and 40 or 50 feet deep. And the ramp was at the back. And so I came up the ramp, and I turned the corner, and there was like foliage all the way across the stage. And I had asked to have a chair on the stage for one segment of my talk. But I walked around looking at the foliage, looking at the crowd, being nice, probably 1,500, 2,000 people in the room. And I looked at the chairperson, and I hit the chair with my knee. Because they had asked my 14-year-old daughter to put it on the stage. They didn't have a sergeant at arms at the international speech competition. Are you kidding me? So my daughter literally just put it on the stage. She had no idea I was walking around a blind spot, and I busted my knee on that chair, and I limped all the way over, and I shook hands with the chairperson, and I delivered my talk. Of course, after I busted my knee and I shook her hand, I came back and I took a deep breath because I didn't want to cry over my knee. I finished my talk, and I went back and sat down, and the guy next to me said, "We don't have a snowball's chance." That was so good. And the guy beside him said the same thing, and the one beside her on this side said the same thing, and I was number 8 out of 10. So if they're saying that with 8 out of 10, I only got 2 that can beat me at this point, right? And my regional advisor had already said, "This is yours to lose. I've heard the other people rehearsing. You really have to mess up to not win." All right then. So I'm feeling pretty good, pretty confident about myself. And then number 10 gets up there. And I almost wanted to raise my hand and go, plagiarism, because I've heard every word of that speech. I could quote it to you. Because what I did to prepare was I studied the previous year's competition. And this guy was delivering a speech I'd heard before. Word for word. That's not allowed. And so I was getting a little perturbed about that until they called his name, and I went, "Oh." And the Holy Spirit said, "Number 6. This is his 6th time." And so when they started calling names, they made a mistake. If you've ever competed with Toastmasters, you know they do not announce runner-up. They only announce winner, unless there's 2 or 3 places. And so they started announcing the name, and they named the title of my speech before they named me. They got about halfway through the title, and somebody goes, no, disqualified for time. The guy behind me said, "You were 9 seconds over, dude." I'm like, "No, my speech was meticulously timed." Meticulously? I'm making up words. Meticulously timed. I know how long it was. He said, "No, you were 9 seconds over." So when I went back and watched the video, which I still have, it's still on YouTube, they started the timer when I ran into the chair, not when I started talking. So let me jump back to that day that I was telling people your weapons of mighty warfare. Were you in the room or on Zoom when that happened, Bethany? Beep. Beep. Were you in the room or were you on Zoom the day that... Yes, you. You were on Zoom. Okay. One of the guys that I was coaching on the stage spent 40 seconds introing his story before he told his story. And I said, "You can lose a competition in 9 seconds. You can lose a life faster than that." How long was the transition from the bottom of the C-17 to eternity? 32 feet per second. But see, our challenge is we prepare these stories because we want to strike the stage. We prepare these stories because we want to get on the platform. We prepare these stories because we want to have an impact on other people's lives. And what we forget is sometimes preparing that story isn't about us. It's not about our story. It's not about selling our wares as much as it's about how can God use us as a weapon in his hand. Whatever. Look, the truth of the matter is this. We don't have time to build a fiefdom. We don't have time to build ego. Time is short. Now, part of the message of what we do at Story Power Academy is what I call lead the narrative. And the challenge with the narrative is most people say, well, I don't have one. I'm like, no, you have a narrative. And you know that you have a narrative if you have a calling. You know that you have a narrative if you have an assignment. Plugging your power into my laptop might solve that problem, but I think we've got different adapters. Mine's C only. So you could touch the screen and see if it comes back up, but it may or may not. It's a C to C. Oh no, it's a C power adapter.
We just need to relog in.
Yeah. It just has an attitude. Why? Because I'm about to give you a weapon. And I think yeah, it's fully charged. It just doesn't want to work today because I might teach you something that would change the world. Anybody agree with that? Yeah, there's a threat there that when you start doing things the enemy doesn't like, the enemy starts doing things that are unexpected. Anybody ever encountered the unexpected? You're like, how in the world could that have happened? It only takes a second on YouTube or TikTok, right? You see the picture of the guy walking down the street and then a tire flies over his head and you're like, from whence reigneth tires? A tire? How does that happen? Where did that come from? I mean, that was not in my logbook today calendar. Yep, appointment, tire falling from the sky. No, it's not there. How do you plan for that? What do you do about it? You just rock on. The most important degree I have, says Warren Buffett, one of the richest men on the planet until Elon came along, was my Dale Carnegie course. I have a coaching client right now. This is no joke. When he decided, he went through one of our 6 weeks classes, the 6 weeks to boost your business through Story Power. As he went through that class, he said, I want to do more coaching with you. And I told him the price, and he went, I'll have to ask my wife. And so he puts on a Zoom call. And she goes, you know, he's like an MIT grad. I said, yeah. She said, I've been teaching for 15 years. MIT grads are not communicators. They're engineers. Okay. She said, you really think he can help? I said, I think I can help. She said, you think you can make him a communicator? I said, well, of course I can. The kind of communicator will be up to the kind of work that he does. About 7 weeks into our coaching, he goes, you know, I haven't thought about it in a long time, but I think the most powerful thing that I did to advance my career was the Dale Carnegie course while I was in college. And you know what the result of that revelation was? I'm going to change the entire course that I'm teaching, and I want you to help me revamp what I'm doing so that I can help college kids who are going to school for engineering be better at communication so they can advance their careers. He said, I had no less than 30 promotions in 5 years because I learned how to treat people like people. Speakers who talk about what life has taught them never fail to keep the attention of their listeners. What I teach through Story Power is tell me the stories you lived through. I don't need you to make up. I don't need you to quote everybody else. I need you to tell me the story that you lived through. I was blind, and now I see. What was the result of that? The people in the church went, who told you that? Who did that? Who fixed your eyes? And he went, I don't know his name. So you're just telling me some random stranger walked down the road and healed you? Yes. What did you do to earn that miracle? Nothing. What specifically did you ask him? Nothing. In fact, he walked up to me and said, you want to see? Am I lying? That's what it says, right? He didn't chase Jesus down. He didn't know his name. He didn't get baptized first. He didn't go through some discipleship program. He encountered a living God, and the living God changed him. Amen. Do you understand? That's our purpose. That's what this thing is made for. Go ye therefore preach the gospel. All authority on heaven and earth is mine, and I'm giving it to you. That's what this thing is made for. To take people from inspiration to action, you must put together the right words and deliver them at the right moment. You can improve your value by 50% just by learning public speaking. There is no greater place to build your business than right here. There's no better place to build a kingdom than right here. There's no better place to build a fiefdom than right here. And you better know the difference, or it can cost you everything. Hard truth. No one cares about your story. No one cares about your story. They're all asking one question. What is it? What's in it for me? WIIFM. That's all they want to know. What's in it for me? You're telling me your story. In fact, I get coaching clients that are on a call with me, and they get all upset. I've had them at the retreat. Natalie's witnessed this a couple of times. Had people at the retreat, and I'm coaching them through a story by telling them a story and then teaching them how to use it. And they'll say to me, don't tell me your stories, just help me rewrite mine. I'm like, you don't understand that the teaching and the mechanism is buried in the story, right? Story craft, step 1, very basic. By the way, I'm on slide, I think, number 8. I have 42 slides in 17 minutes. You ready? Take pictures, write notes, and listen faster. Make it a memorable moment and not a monologue. Nobody cares about your story, your life story, your cycle, the evolution. I thought Rhonda did a remarkable job being up here for 40 minutes and having more than one story. How many of you would have listened to 45 minutes of the same story? I mean, even if you're really good, if you're Bo Eason good, 45 minutes into Bo Eason's story, you're still going, and then, no and then, no and then. Laugh if you know. Dude, where's my car? Here are the 4 steps of story power. Storycraft, stagecraft, connection, and narrative. What you need to know is that narrative is both the beginning and the end. It's the bookends. You start with the narrative. You ready for it? You want to know what your narrative is? Get a pen, write this down. Really hard, super complicated. You probably heard it 5 times already today, but you need to know it, and I'm going to simplify it to the most simplified way of knowing what your narrative is that you've probably ever heard it put. But you know you've asked this question. If you're a coach, you've asked your clients this question. You ready? Who do you help and how? And I can tell you, the number of people that I have coached who came from somebody else's coaching program, and they come into my program, they're like, help me write the story that sells. No. Help me write the speech that sells. No. Why? Because when I ask you, who do you help and how, and you don't have an answer to that question, we don't know what story to tell. The 12-year-old or the prisoner? Those dudes are different. I've raised 2 daughters and 2 sons. We have, by December, 14 grandkids. I know my wife is really young to have 14 grandkids. She looks incredible for her age, even at 29. But I can also tell you that no 2 of those 14 think alike. None of our 4 think alike. And when you realize that, what we're really saying is, you've got to communicate to everyone a little bit differently. That's why I tell my clients you have to have more than one story. In fact, you should have 100. Now, here's what the storycraft process looks like. We take days, weeks, months, hours, years with some people to get through this process because the majority of people who come to start working with me early on say, I don't have stories. I'm like, yeah, you do. One of my clients is an attorney. He was a JAG officer. He's a Pepperdine PhD in law graduate. And he says, we don't do stories. I said, yes, you do. He's like, no, we don't. I'm like, yes, you do. You just have to figure out how to use them. And so that's what we do, is we help people work through finding these stories. Mining the story is the first part. Story qualifying is the next. And that is where you actually look at a story and go, does it meet all of the objectives of being a good story that's going to work well to bring people my way, to convert them, to change their mind, to change their idea, to bring transformation into their life? The story selection process then is looking at your audience and going, okay, so if I tell this story right now, how many people are going to get it? Anybody in here speak brain rot? No, Luke left the room. He's probably the only one. Skibbity. Right. You barely even pronounce those words. They're like Swedish names. They have no vowels. But if your story selection process doesn't ask who's in my audience and how am I going to help them, what am I going to offer them, then what you're going to offer them is probably not going to be super effective. Story development. This is when we actually start talking through the story and then asking the question, does that even make any sense? And let me tell you something. You cannot do that in a vacuum. Which means you're probably going to look silly. At some point, you're going to tell a story and people are going to look at you like, what? What does that even mean? And that doesn't mean your story doesn't work. It just means you haven't quite crafted it right. Change an ingredient or two. Take out a word, add a couple extras. And then, of course, the psychology of stories. Someone spoke earlier, Justin even lined it out in the rules. We have a problem sometimes telling our own story, and that is we forget that what we live through is still someone else's trigger. And so when we work on the psychology of story and the story crafting process, we mine all those stories. We bring them all out. They're all on the table like a pizza buffet. And then we realize some people are gluten-free, and some people are allergic, and some just don't eat pork for religious reasons. But if you're going through the pizza menu, you better figure that out as you go, because what you serve up may not be to their appetite, and that's not their failure, that's yours. Who do you help, and how? All of these are necessary to build the foundation of a predetermined narrative. So this little screen here, this is the first three. That grid is now 27 columns, is that right? You remember? I think that it's 22 or 27 columns wide. And all of them ask questions about your story as you start crafting it to be able to look at it and go, that story is ready for the stage. And there are places where the first time you go through the story, you put the title on the left and you start working through there and you realize that one's not ready yet. It needs some time to marinate. It needs some time to bake. Practice makes? Perfect practice. Perfect makes permanent. I used to make my own t-shirts. Actually, we still have a t-shirt maker and a hat maker. And they're right there in the studio, right next to the cameras. And we make t-shirts from time to time. We make them for clients from time to time. But I learned early on that if you ask people in the industry for help, they don't see you as someone willing to give help to you. They see you as competition. Raise your hand if that's ever happened to you. You try to get advice and they're like, I am not going to tell you how to do what I do because then I won't get to do what I do and charge you for it. And so when I started making t-shirts, they were the ugliest, cheapest things you've ever seen in your life. And I thought, well, it's got to be the t-shirts, or it's got to be the press, or it's got to be the iron-ons. And so I went to Walmart and I bought the more expensive iron-ons, and guess what I got? More expensive junk. And so I bought better t-shirts, and guess what I got? Even more expensive junk. And so I bought a very professional $350, 500 degree, 15 by 15 platen press to make t-shirts. And guess what I got? Super expensive junk. And so I asked for advice from a lot of people in the industry and nobody would give it to me. So finally, I bit the bullet. I ordered 1,000 professional quality transfers. Guess what I made? Really, really expensive junk. And so I called the guy. I'm like, hey, can I just get my money back on these transfers? Because obviously they don't work. And he said to me, you ready? In his best Southern Alabama, did you pop and stretch it? What? Exactly what I said. Did I who's he what's it? I said, did I who's he what's? He said, did you pop and stretch it? I said, I made the... He's like, well, you got to pop and stretch it. Put another one on there. I'm like, I've already wasted so much time. Yeah, you got to speak redneck. He said, put another one on there. And so I opened the press up. I took one of the transfers I'd already made. I laid a t-shirt down. He goes, now preheat it. And I went, never thought of that. So I preheated the t-shirt. And he said, now I'm going to tell you, put your phone on speakerphone, and when I tell you to, you're going to lift that press up. I said, all right. So we put the transfer on. We got it all lined up straight. And he said, now just pull it down and leave it down until I tell you. All right? Beep, beep, beep. I think it's done. He's like, no, just leave it down there. I'm like, it's smoking. He said, oh, it's almost ready then. I dated a girl like that one time. She didn't use a timer on the oven, she used a smoke detector. T-shirt smoking. I'm thinking this is not going to be good. Finally, he says, now, put your phone on speaker, lay it down. Here's what you got to do. As soon as you pull that thing up, I want you to grab both sleeves, pull as hard as you can. Mind you, the last one of these that I made before I got this guy on the phone, we scraped with a razor blade. We pulled with tweezers. We soaked it in the bathtub. We soaked it with bleach. We tried using Simple Green and Goo Gone. And that piece of paper from the back of that transfer to this day is stuck to that shirt. And I'm thinking now this one's smoking. I'm probably just going to have a shirt with a big square hole in the middle of it. So when he said to, I popped it up, I grabbed both sleeves, and I went, and that piece of paper went to the floor, and I went, you've got to be kidding me. It was that easy all along? I've wasted that many shirts and that many transfers and that much time because I didn't go. He said, how's it look? I said, ridiculous. Because now my square goes like this. He said, just stretch it all out until it's even and square again. He said, now, you had that problem with the shiny, right? I said, yeah. He said, you still have a shiny? No. Well, you had the problem with the not being able to get paper off. You don't have that problem. No. He said, look really, really close. What do you see? I said, you know what it looks like is it looks like somebody actually pulled the threads apart and painted each thread with a different color. He said, oh, you done it right. All right, so here's what I want you to learn. How many of you make T-shirts? Exactly. How many of you care about that story? How many of you got a lesson out of that story? See, there's at least 4 in there, right? Your competition is not going to give you an advantage to beat them. You don't know what you don't know. And practicing the wrong thing the wrong way over and over again doesn't make it get better. It makes you better at doing the wrong thing wrong. Now, how many of you could use all 3 of those lessons in your coaching business? How many of you know that people walk around in life every day thinking, I've got this all figured out. My faith is good. And after about 30 seconds of talking to them, you're like, you are going to hell and don't even know it. Am I right? You just stay away from C-17s anytime in the near future because we need to talk. See, the power of a well-crafted, well-told story is that it doesn't have to sound like a life saga. It doesn't have to sound like I was bitten in half by a shark or climbed Mount Everest. It sounds like the things that we do every day, and somebody can easily transfer T-shirts out of there to bad relationships or cooking in the kitchen. And whatever the scenario was in your life where you can say, this is what I did, here's how I did it wrong, you can be a little self-deprecating humor in there. Nobody cares about that as long as they know you're human. How many of you have read Bob Burg's book, The Go-Giver? If not, you probably know the quote. We tend to do business with people we know, like, and trust. If I told you, I could tell you a story that in 90 seconds demonstrates that you can build trust in less than 90 seconds, how many of you would want to hear a 90-second story? I pull up at a gas pump, fill into my old SUV, 60-gallon tank on this thing. It's like a giant school bus. I'm just waiting and waiting and waiting, and this little minivan pulls up on the other side, driver steps out, cute as a button, perfect little hair, perfect little pantsuit, perfect little nails. She walks to the back, starts putting her gas in, and I notice there's a ridge where her wedding ring's supposed to be, but there's no ring there. Curious. I look up, she's got tears streaming down her face, messing up her makeup. I look forward and I see 2 toddlers strapped in the back seat. Cheerios everywhere. Hair everywhere. One of them got shoes on the wrong feet, the other one's got no shoes on, and their socks don't match. And I looked her in the eye and I said, I was raised the only son of a single mom. And then I married one. Can I pray for you? Now, if you've done any kind of human analysis, you know something about that woman that I know. There's some things that I don't know. I don't know if she walked in on her husband with somebody else, threw the ring at him, and left. That's a possible. It could be that she left on her way to work. She's got to drop the kids off. She's already running late. They're a mess. She's still got to drop them off and get to work, and forgot her wedding ring. She's about to call him at home again and explain, I forgot my wedding ring. Will you bring it to me? She does on a regular basis. Or it could be that she's on her way to the hospital to identify the body. I have no idea what scenario she's actually in, but here's what I do know, because the powers of observation have told me this, and I learned this from Dale Carnegie. Always speak in the terms of the other person's interest. I watched my mother live most of her life getting her butt kicked by life. I know what that looks like. I married a single mom. And the reason that I married this single mom probably started to do with the fact that I met her on a Wednesday. She came back to church on Sunday. On the following Wednesday, somebody else invited her back to church. She came back on Sunday. On the following Monday, I get a phone call. I was driving a truck back in the days when a cell phone needed a wheelbarrow. And she calls me on my mobile phone, and she's like, my daughter has to be picked up from school in an hour, and my car just blew up. And I'm like, define blew up. I mean, like, she's like, no, but there's a giant puddle of oil underneath the car, and it just makes funny noises. Close enough. So I said, hang on a minute. I called the girl that I'd been hanging out with at the time, in fact, the one that was with me on the church visitation team when I met her, and I said, you got an old car, right? She said, yeah, a 1979 Ford Fairmont. I'm like, perfect. Take it to the new girl and let her drive that until we figure out a solution for her. You go get my brand new car. It was only 2 years old at the time. I said, go get my new car. The keys are at my apartment. I'll call the apartment and tell them to let you in. She goes, great, I'll do that. She calls me back about 3 minutes later. She goes, wait, isn't your car a stick? Yeah. I can't drive a stick. So I called the new girl back, and I'm like, the only solution I have is my car, and it's a stick. She goes, I can drive a stick. And I never got my keys back. September will be 32 years. Labor Day weekend. Smartest thing I did besides picking her was picking Labor Day weekend, so I cannot forget my anniversary. Listen, I still got 30 slides that I could go through. I'm going to skip all that. I want you to know this, though. I went to see Minions and Monsters the other night. Not with grandkids, just me and my wife. And there was not a preview in front of that show, not one, that wasn't witchcraft. Conjuring, spells, raising the dead. We've forgotten the purpose. When Jesus stood in front of Pilate, and Pilate said, don't you understand I have the authority? I have the power to crucify you or set you free. He goes, no. You got it wrong. You have no authority over me except what my Father gave you. He could have said it another way. He could have said, listen, Pilate, know your place. But he didn't. Why? Because his heart was for Pilate too. What is the truth? You're looking at him. I am the way, the truth, and the light of the world. When the light shines in the darkness can't overcome it. But if your story's not ready when the moment comes, if you'd been standing on the tarmac of that C-17 when it took off, what would you have said before they grabbed the bottom of that plane and flew into eternity? Be ready, in season, out of season, to give a reason for the hope that you have. And understand that we live in a world where people are asking questions. And instead of giving them TikTok answers, we're giving them Harry Potter. Don't just know your story, know how to make it brief, bright, and done. Thank you.
Think storytelling's just for bedtime? Nah, it's the secret sauce for business magic. Stuck in a rut with bland pitches and yawning clients? Enter Boost Your Business with Story Power. 6 weeks of epic storytelling training. It's like leveling up in a video game but for your career. Master the art of narrative and watch connections blossom like a viral TikTok. Simple, impactful, and game-changing. Ready to transform your biz vibes? Dive in now and make storytelling your superpower.
This 6 weeks guided program is specifically designed for those people who say, I know I need to tell stories. I need to tell better stories because the ones I have are boring or they're not getting across. Or as John Maxwell says, everyone communicates and, well, few connect. Now, as a participant in this course, what I would really love to know from you, put it in the discussion on the course if you're already registered online. Send me a chat, send me a DM, send me a text, send me an email. I'd really love to know what you hope to get out of this course. Now, I can tell you what we're going to discuss, and I can tell you what I plan to teach and train you on, and I can tell you even what we plan to discuss each week on the calls for the next 6 weeks. I'm going to go over all of that for you in just a moment. I can also tell you that my clients who get the greatest success are the ones who apply the Story Power process to their business development to increase their impact, their influence, and their income. Now, the Story Power process includes story mining, story selection, story qualification, story crafting, connecting with your audience, and leading the narrative. And if you leave any one of those parts out, you're going to find that, well, you're just not as effective as you want to be. You're not going to grow your business to the same level. You're not going to lead with impact and influence like you hope to. I can also tell you that the people who apply these things, well, they're not failing in their business. The reason a lot of people fail in their business is they continue to fail to connect the solution they offer with the problem that their clients have. The pain and the solution never come together. And a lot of that failure is because they're not clearly articulating how their solution solves someone else's problem. It comes down to a question something like this: who do you help and how? Yes, that's one of the first things we're going to discuss over the next 6 weeks of Boost Your Business with Story Power.
Master the Story Power method to captivate your audience, improve workplace culture, and 10x your fundraising.
Scan the QR code to book your first coaching call or visit storypowercoach.com.
Subscribe now for our extensive video library of leadership lessons